Verhelaxal. I am Skegivetter, and welcome to the Norse Code. I have been working on a runic calendar for a couple weeks now, and that's what I wanted this episode to be, was about the runic calendar. However, it is a bit more complicated and a bit more tedious to make one than I thought, so that's going to have to wait a little bit longer. But I didn't want to go too long without having another episode, so I decided that tonight I'm going to bring to you one of my favorite Norse stories. This is not about a specific god. This is just a story that involves a lot of them. If you think back to our episode on Loki, you will have heard me mention this story, the Lokasenna, or the Flyting of Loki. Now, a flyting is a contest consisting of the exchange of insults between two or more parties. Often it's conducted in verse. A modern version of this would be the rap battle. So this is Loki's flyting, although it's not really exchange of insults as much as it is Loki insulting the rest of the gods and the rest of the gods standing up for themselves. But we will go through the story and talk a little bit about it at the end. So here we go into the Lokasenna, which is one of the poems within the Poetic Edda. So sometime after Baldur's death, a great feast was had at the island of Helice, home of Aegir, god of the sea and of brewing. Thor and Tyr have secured the cauldron of Hymir, and Hymir is the Jotun father of Tyr. The cauldron of Hymir is said to be 5 miles deep and probably the only cauldron large enough for Aegir to make enough ale for the gods to feast on. So at this feast, aside from Agar and his wife Ran, we have Odin, his wife Frigga, Bragi and his wife Idun, Tyr, Njord, Skaði, Freyr and his servants Bigthir and Bela, Freya, Vidar, Gefjon, Heimdall, Sif, and a handful of elves. Thor was not in attendance for this feast. He was out on another journey, but he will appear later in the story. So Aegir's hall is lit with nuggets of shining gold, and Aegir's servants, Fimithang and Eldir, use magic to keep the gods' cups filled with ale. The gods praised Fimithang and Eldir for their service. Loki heard this praise and in a fit of jealousy killed Fimithang, lunging from his seat and killing him with his daggers. The gods were outraged. They stood, shook their shields and howled at Loki, throwing him out of the hall. Later, Loki ambushes Eldir outside the hall. "Stop there, Eldir. What is going on in there when the gods are not feasting and drinking? What are they talking about?" So Eldir responds, "The gods are comparing their weapons and their prowess in battle. You will not find a kind word towards you in there, not from god nor elf." "I am going back in. I don't mean to miss this feast. I'll fill their hearts with hatred and grief and mix venom in their ale." So Loki enters the hall, and the gods grew silent. Loki then walks to the center of the hall. "I have come rather thirsty from a long journey. Would one of the gods care to bring me a cup of ale?" The gods are silent. "Why are you all so silent? Haven't you one word between you? Either make room and give me a place at this feast, or else tell me I am unwelcome." The god Bragi stood. "The gods will no longer make room and give you a place amongst them. You're not the kind of company they want at a feast. Loki ignored Bragi and instead addressed Odin. Remember, Odin, how not long ago we mixed our blood in brotherhood. You swore then that you would only drink if a drink were brought to us both. Odin looks at his son Vidar and says, Move over, Vidar. Make room for the wolf's father. We don't want any more of Loki's troublemaking here in Aegir's hall. Vidar got up, poured a cup of ale and brought it to Loki, and Loki, with a spiteful expression, said, Greetings, gods, goddesses, greetings. I greet all this holy gathering, all but one. Bragi, slumped on the bench over there. So Bragi shook his head. If only you'll keep your rancor to yourself and spare yourself the fury of the gods, I'll give you a horse out of my hoard. I will give you a sword, and what's more, I'll give you a ring. Bragi the bragger, said Loki. You've never had a horse or a ring to your name, and you never will have. All of the gods and the elves in this hall, you're the greatest coward. When arrows are loosed, you barely peep from behind your shield. If I were outside, said Bragi evenly, and not sitting here in Aegir's hall, I'd twist your head off, you miserable body. That would be a fair price for your lies. If only your actions matched up to your big mouth, Loki retorted. Look at Bragi sitting on the bench, as sweet and soft as any bride. If you feel so angry, why don't you get up and fight? Heroes don't waste words mapping things out. Then Idun turned to face her husband. Bragi, I beg you, think of us and your children and all the gods. Leave Loki alone. Don't exchange any more insults here in Aegir's hall. Enough, Idun, shouted Loki. I know no woman as wanton as you. What an appetite! You even wound your white arms about your brother's murder. Despite Loki's withering abuse, Idun did not lose her composure. I will not exchange insults with Loki here in Aegir's hall. All this ale has made Bragi talkative, and I've told him to keep his temper. Then the goddess Gefn added, Why do these two gods bandy jibes and sneers? Everyone knows how Loki revels in foul mockery and hates the gods in Asgard. Enough, Gefn, shouted Loki. I know a thing or two about you. I even know who you seduced. That boy offered you a sparkling necklace, and you straddled him. Loki, you're mad to incense Gefn, Odin called. You've lost your senses. She can see all that is to come as clearly as I can. Enough, Odin, shouted Loki. You've never could be even-handed. You've often let the weaker man snatch victory in battle. I may have let the weaker man snatch victory in battle, Odin replied. You lived under the earth for 8 winters in the shape of a woman, a milkmaid. Yes, and you've borne babies and been milked by them, a woman through and through. They say that you practice satyr, which is a type of magic, often only practiced by women. You once worked the charms and spells like a witch, replied Loki. They say you moved amongst men in the shape of a witch, a woman through and through. Now Odin's wife Frigg tried to restore peace. You would both do better to keep these things to yourselves, she said. There's nothing gained from bringing up what's best forgotten. Enough, Frigg, shouted Loki. You're Fjorgen's daughter, and you were born a whore. You may be Odin's wife, but you've shared your bed with his brothers, Vili and Ve. If I had a son, said Frigg, a son such as Balder, sitting beside me in Aegir's hall, you would not get away without a fight. Ah, Frigg, said Loki scathingly, I can see you'd like to know more about my skills. It was I who fixed things so that you will never again welcome Balder home. Freya rounded on Loki, her eyes blazing. Loki, you're mad to boast about your terrible crime. There's nothing Frigg does not know, even though she may remain silent. So it sounds like Frigga knew that Loki was involved in Balder's murder, but kept it silent so as not to rock the boat, so to speak. Enough, Freya, shouted Loki. I know you through and through, and you're not wholly spotless. You've slept with every single god and elf gathered in this hall. Your mouth is full of lies, said Freya, and you're spelling out your own doom. You'll leave here wishing you'd never bothered to come. Enough, Freya, shouted Loki. You're a fool, foul witch, with a string of evil works to your name. The bright gods caught you in bed with your own brother, and then, Freya, you farted. See, this is why I love Norse mythology. Even they have heart humor. So Njord raises his voice in defense of the goddesses and against Loki. A woman lies with her husband, or lover, or both. Does it really matter much in the end? It's far worse to clap your eyes on this womanish god who has borne babies. Enough, Njord, shouted Loki. You were sent from the east and given to the gods as a hostage. Hymir's daughter squatted over you and pissed straight into your mouth. The journey was long, said Njord, but it was a great honor to be given to the gods as a hostage, and I fathered a son who is well loved and highest of those on high. That's too much, Njord, said Loki. I'll cap your absurd boast and share your secret. You spawned your fair son on your own sister, so at least you knew what to expect. Then Tyr spoke up in support of Njord's son. Freyr, he called out, is the noblest of all the brave gods. He doesn't trifle with virgins or seduce other men's wives, and he frees bound men from their fetters. Enough, Tyr, shouted Loki. You've never been much of a hand at bringing two parties into an understanding. He smiled wickedly. Need I remind you how you lost your right hand when Fenrir snapped it off? I lost a hand, but you lost Hordvitnir, the mighty wolf. Hordvitnir is another name for Fenrir. We were both hapless, and now, in his fetters, Fenrir must chafe and wait till the world's end. Enough, Tyr, shouted Loki again. Your good wife was lucky enough to be the mother of my son, and you were paid 1 penny, you poor fool, by way of recompense. The wolf, cried Freyr, will lie in chains at the mouth of the river until the gods meet their doom, and unless you bite your tongue, you liesmith, you'll soon be chained up too. You're the one who bought Gymir's daughter with gold, retorted Loki, and sold your sword in the bargain. You poor fool. When the sons of Muspelheim ride through Mirkwood, you'll have to await them empty-handed. Freyr's servant, Bigvir, was enraged at the way in which Loki insulted his master. If I were so nobly born as Freyr, he said, and sat in so high a seat, I'd grab this ghastly crow and beat his bones to pulp. Who is this little creature? Asked Loki, growling and yapping and snapping. You're always whispering in Freyr's ear and quibbling by the quern. I am Barley Bigvir, and Freyr's servant. I am quick to get my way, as the gods and men allow. To see the Allfather's sons all gather to drink ale fills me with delight. Enough, Bigvir, shouted Loki. You've never been able to give men their due portion of meat, and when heroes made ready to fight, no one could find you. You were hiding under the straw strewn on the floor. You're drunk, Loki, called Heimdall. Your jabs and gibes are insane. Loki, Why not leave off now? No one cares about curbing his tongue. Enough, Heimdall, shouted Loki. It was settled long ago that your life should be menial. You can never sleep, nor sit down. Day and night you stand awake and watchman of the gods. You're as quick as they come, Loki, said Skathi. But you won't be at large twirling your tail much longer. The gods will bind you to a boulder with guts ripped out of your ice-cold sun. Even if the gods bind me to a boulder with guts ripped from my ice-cold sun, I led the way when we killed and captured your father, the giant Dazi, jeered Loki. If you led the way when the gods captured and killed Thiazi, Skadi said, my hall and my temples will always echo with curses on your name. Loki's mouth twisted, and his eyes shone orange and green. You spoke so much more sweetly to Laufey's son when you invited him into your bed. That's well worth a mention, since we're both giving our weaknesses an airing. Thor's wife Sif stood up. She left her place at the bench, stepped towards Loki. As gently as she could, she took the cup from Loki's clenched right fist, filled it again with ale. Greetings, Loki, she said with sweet, clear voice. Take this crystal cup, brimming with fine ale. At least allow you find me alone amongst all of us, wholly guiltless. Loki took the cup, raised it, and drained it in one movement. You'd certainly stand alone if you were as chaste with all the men as you were with most. But I think I know who has inveigled you out of your husband's arms and set you on fire. His name was crafty Loki. Freyr's second servant, Bela, raised her voice in Aegir's hall. The mountains are quaking. That can only mean one thing. Thor is on his way here from Vilskirnir. He'll silence the one in this hall who slanders and sneers at the gods and men alike. Enough, Bela, shouted Loki. You are Big Veer's wife, and you're poisonous through and through. It's a scandal that you mix with the gods at all, caked with your own excrement. Loki was so carried away by his fight of words that he did not see that Thor had walked into Aegir's hall. The god of thunder waited until Loki had his say, and then stepped forward, crashed his fist on the trestle table, so that the crystal cups leapt into the air. Hold your tongue, you scum, he roared, or my hammer Mjolnir will shut your mouth. I'll swipe your shoulder stone off your neck, and that will be the end of you. Look, everyone, cried Loki unabashed. Here's the son of Earth. With a blustering bully you are, Thor. But you'll be less fierce when you grapple with Fenrir and see him gulp down Odin, father of victory. Hold your tongue, you scum, roared Thor, or my hammer Mjolnir will shut your mouth. I'll pick you up and hurl you into the east, and no one will have to set eyes on you again. If I were you, Thor, said Loki, I wouldn't say too much more about your own journey east. You cowered in the thumb of a glove, you noble god. You quite forgot your name was Thor. Hold your tongue, you scum, roared Thor, or my hammer Mjolnir will shut your mouth. I'll raise my right hand, and what smashed Hungir will smash your bones. For all those threats with your hammer, said Loki, I fancy I have a long life before me. Do you remember the giant Skrymir? The giant Skrymir's bag and how unyielding those straps were? You were unable to get your provision and felt quite faint with hunger. Hold your tongue, you scum, roared Thor, or my hammer Mjolnir will shut your mouth. What smashed Hungnir will dispatch you to hell, right down to the doors of the dead, the god of thunder gripping Mjolnir menacingly. Loki raised one hand, shook his head. I've shown the gods and the sons of gods the sharp edge of my thoughts, but because of you and you alone, I think I will take my leave now. I know all about your strength. Loki paused and looked defiantly around him, and then addressed himself to his host. You've brewed fine ale, Aegir, and you'll never hold another feast such as this. Flickering flames will gouge on this hall and gut it and destroy everything you own. Your body will be flayed by fire. Loki turned and was gone, his terrible words still echoing around the halls. For a long time the gods, goddesses, and elves stared into their ale, shaken and grieving. In silence they sat, and in silence they rose and left Aegir's hall. Loki knew that he had gone too far, and that his days in Asgard had come to an end. He knew the gods would avenge Baldur's death and detention in Hell. He ran away. He made for a deserted part of Midgard, a remote place in the mountains. He found a hollow near Fangang's Falls, and the shapeshifter often turned himself into a salmon and leapt into the seething cauldron at the base of the falls. The cross currents whirled around him, the thunder roared above him. Still, the salmon felt unsafe. For there was nothing that escaped Odin's eye when he sat in Hidskjalf. He saw the comings and goings of every living creature in the 9 worlds, and when he saw Loki's efforts to escape his fate, he sent a party of gods from Asgard to capture him. To catch the salmon Loki, the gods used a net to trawl the water. To escape being caught in the net, the Loki salmon jumped out of the water and over the net, but Thor caught him in his hands. Thor held on and tightened his grip. He squeezed and stayed the slippery salmon by the tail. It writhed and it twisted, but it could not escape. Loki was caught, and at last he knew it. After Baldur's death, not one of the gods would stain Gladsheim by spilling Loki's blood. But there was nothing holy about the barren ground of Midgard, and they were all eager to take vengeance on him. Thor and some of the other gods led Loki into a cave. A few other gods went off in pursuit of Loki's 2 sons, Vali and Narvi. They changed Vali into a wolf, and at once he leapt at his brother and sunk his teeth into his brother's throat. He ripped Narvi's body apart before bounding away, howling toward Jotunheim. The gods took over where Vali had left off. They drew out Narvi's entrails and made their way to the cave. Loki's faithful wife Sigyn went with them, sorrowing over her fate of her 2 sons and of her husband. They bound Loki to a boulder within the cavern, and by the words of Skadi used his sons Narvi's entrails to bind Loki to the boulder. Then Skadi carried in a vile snake into the cave. She fastened it to a stalactite so that its venom would drip straight onto Loki's face. For all his wiles and wit, there was nothing Loki can do. He lay still. He looked at nobody and said nothing. Then the gods left Loki there, no longer flushed, but heavy-hearted, and sorrowing as they left him to his fate and to his faithful Sigyn. And so Sigyn holds a wooden bowl over Loki's face, catching the snake's dripping venom. And when that bowl is brimming, Sigyn carries the bowl away and empties it into a rock basin. Loki is left unguarded. Then venom splashes on Loki's face, and in the torment he shudders and writhes. He cannot escape, and the whole earth quakes. Loki lies bound. That is how things are, and how things will remain until Ragnarok. And we all know what happens at Ragnarok. We've talked about that before, but we'll cover that in more detail in a future episode. So what did you think of Lokasenna? This is one of my favorite stories. I find it quite fascinating that Loki can spill all of that dirty laundry on the gods, and they take it for as long as they have. But one thing of note from when we covered Loki in the past is that Loki always causes trouble and mischief and problems. But the gods are always better off for it, for Loki spins it and turns it into something better. So in this case, could Loki have been doing the same thing? Sure, he acted rashly in killing the servant. There was really no need for that. But maybe subconsciously he was jealous of these servants getting praise when he does not get it. For all the good that he has brought upon the gods, when has the gods ever thanked him? And so, while not justified, it's understandable why he would snap. And then coming back in and insulting the gods, airing their dirty laundry and insulting them and bringing all these secrets to bear. Perhaps it's exactly what the gods needed. Having their faults, their character flaws, their mistakes thrown at them, that now they can see those mistakes and those flaws, and now they can work to fix them. So, it bears the question, if the gods did not punish Loki, if the gods instead took what Loki said to heart and tried to figure out if what Loki was saying was true, how can they become better? How can they improve themselves to not have this again? And I think that's where the gods may have failed Loki at this point. Instead, they had enough of Loki. And so they bound him to a rock. Perhaps they would have been more accepting of this if Loki did not admit to the death of Balder. Because that is the one story in which Loki caused mischief, in which the gods were not better off for. So what do you think? Was Loki right in what he was doing and trying to help the gods? Or did he merely snap and cause problems and the gods were just in their punishment of him? From this story alone, I don't think we can answer that question. I think we can make some assumptions and answer based off those assumptions, but we don't know the minds of the gods. These are beings far above us. How can we ever think to comprehend the way they think? And that's all I have for you tonight. It's one of my favorite stories, the Lokasenna. One of my favorite poems of the Poetic Edda. Now, if you go and read the Poetic Edda, the original translation into English of the Lokasenna, you'll notice the language is quite a bit different. I tried to find a version of the story that had a bit more of a modern English feel to it, so it's a little bit easier to understand. So I hope that that helped you. And for those watching on YouTube, I'm very sorry that the camera keeps losing focus. I don't know what's going on with that. But I do hope you enjoyed this story. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think of the story. Whether you think that Loki was right in his actions and was trying to help the gods ultimately, or were the gods right in their punishment of Loki. Or maybe there's some middle ground, and that's what you think is the right course. Leave that down in the comments, and while you're there, like and subscribe to the Norse Code. Join us on Facebook, the Norse Code Podcast, or my Instagram, Skegivetter. And until next time, good evening and good night.